My name is Brian Marr. I am the co-chair of the New York State Minority Assembly Task Force on Human Trafficking and Exploitation. I want to thank you all for being here today. This is the sixth statewide roundtable we've had in pretty much every region of the state of New York. We have been in Syracuse and Buffalo over the last several weeks. We met with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol on the northern border. And this issue is one that, let's just be honest, people don't like talking about. And we felt the need as a conference to put this task force together because we were informed by survivors and by advocates and people like you in this room from throughout the state that it was a serious problem that was not getting the attention and the resources that it deserved. We agree. As the minority conference, our leader Will Barclay and my co-chair Mary Beth Walsh, Assemblywoman from the 112th District, who is on her way. We're going to start out with introductions. First, my colleagues on the dais, starting with our host, Assemblyman John McGowan.
Good morning. I want to thank my colleague, Assemblyman Brian Marr, and Assemblywoman Mary Beth Walsh for leading the charge with this and going throughout the state to talk about this very important issue. And I think as Assemblyman Marr said, something that maybe some folks don't want to talk about, but everyone in this room knows how important it is and the necessity and need to speak about these things and speak about this topic. For me personally, I was a former special victims prosecutor, both in the Bronx as well as Rockland County. So, it was something for me even, I grew up here. I grew up in Rockland County and lived here my whole life and thinking that human trafficking was something that was real and happening in my home county. There were a lot of things that I learned when I went to the DA's office that I wasn't aware of necessarily were happening in the county. But certainly the idea of human trafficking was probably one of the things that I said, wow, this is real and this is happening in every neighborhood, every community throughout the state and probably throughout the country and beyond. So it's so vitally important that we talk about it and we work together. And as we know from these types of forums, we have to talk about these issues. And having folks from, we're all part of the same team, right? We're all rowing in the same direction. We look at, a particular case or an issue from a certain vantage point or what our particular role is, but we're all on the same team. And we all can get better by doing just this, by talking, by sharing, and working together in a collaborative way. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to welcome you all to the 97th Assembly District. Finklestein Library is just such a wonderful addition to our community. It's been here for so long, and this library helps so many people. And this is right within the mission of what this particular library does, host events like this. So I thank everyone here for hosting us. I thank my colleagues for being here, and I want to welcome you all, and I look forward to our discussion this morning. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And yeah, just again, when we were putting this together, we had members that said, hey, I want to host this. This is an important issue, and if it wasn't for John raising his hand and saying he wanted to have a right here in the 97th District, we wouldn't be here. So thank you for hosting. And before we move on to our my colleague, I just want to say thank you to Maria Vanessa. You want to raise your hand a little bit. Thank you so much for hosting us. Do you have anything you want to say to the group?
I'm so happy that we're all here together at Spring Valley. It's a very important issue for us to tackle. So welcome to our library.
We are so blessed to be here, and thank you for hosting us. On cue, our task force co-chair, Mary Beth Walsh.
Oh, well, hi, good morning, everybody. Great traffic coming down this morning, so I apologize I'm a little bit late, but got here safely, and I guess that's the important thing. I just want to say good morning and thank you all for making the time to be here. We found these sessions around the state to be extremely productive, and I'm sure that today will be as well. I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. You're really the subject matter experts here. We're hoping to continue to learn a lot and to develop a report at the end of all of this that will hopefully, guide us as a state to try to start to make some changes that are needed to address this really underreported problem. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure traveling the state with Mary Beth, and we look forward to this roundtable as well. And now my colleague, Matt Slater.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everybody. Matt Slater from the 94th District on the other side of the river. I want to thank our host, John McGowan, who does a fantastic job representing the 97th District in Albany. And I want to thank our co-chairs for joining us today as well. You know, leadership is about leaning in when you have to deal with some uncomfortable topics and subject matter. And so I really want to thank everyone for being here and providing your expertise to help us lean into this conversation. It's a difficult one. I'm here mostly to listen and to hear from you about what we can do better as a state to deal with human trafficking. But I do want to thank you for taking time out of your day. I want to specifically thank Putnam County DA Bob Tendy for coming over, and Supervisor Rob Scarano from the town of Somers for joining us as well from my district. But again, thank you to all of you as well, and looking forward to a great conversation this morning.
We have a packed room, but it is super important that everybody knows who everybody is. Although we have name placards, very succinctly, we are going to go around the room because we do want to hit our 4 discussion points, which will be: how can New York strengthen support for survivors and communities? What coordination and tools do law enforcement and prosecutors need to better combat traffickers and help victims? What impact is the migrant crisis having on human trafficking crimes within the state? And 4, what kinds of education and training are needed to better equip professionals and all New Yorkers to recognize someone who needs help? So if you could just kind of state your name, who you are, what got you to this table. In about a minute or so, we're going to start on the right side of the room here. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, Robert Scarano, Somerstown Supervisor, here today. Matt sent me a message to join. I'm here to listen and to learn. Very passionate about this topic, and just anything I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Agnew-Barajas. I'm the co-director of Immigrant and Refugee Services at Catholic Charities, the Archdiocese of New York, which covers New York City and the Lower Hudson Valley. Thanks for having us.
In Lower Hudson Valley, can you be specific what counties you serve?
Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, Ulster, Sullivan, Rockland, and Orange.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, my name is India Shock. I'm a trafficking counselor with Orange County Probation, and I'm looking forward today to be able to have some takeaways and what to look for and be more informed and knowledgeable on this.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jane Rosenhagen. I am a co-worker of India. I'm also a crime victim counselor from Orange County, and the same thing. We run into this quite often. We work with victims daily, and it's amazing. Sometimes you don't really realize at first who you're actually dealing with, and then when you realize it, you're like, wow, this really is like a human. And you know, sometimes for them it's just very hard for them to realize that it's a human. So, but I'm looking forward also to hearing from everybody today. So thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Dwight Bonk, Superintendent of Wappinger Central School District. Thank you, Assemblyman Slater. Dutchess County, New York. Obviously here to learn. This is a problem that's impacting everyone, and the schools need to be a part of the solution. So I'm here to listen and to learn. Thank you again.
We really appreciate having a school district representative here. Whenever they are part of these discussions, it's 10 times better. So thank you for your
My
attendance.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Marco Contesta, Superintendent in Crow River, just a few miles away. What brings me here this morning is your invitation and my also recognizing, as you all do, that this is a critically important subject. We do see students who have a history of trauma. This stands out, human trafficking, as one of the more extreme versions of trauma a child can have. And knowing that children can't learn unless we support them through whatever they have experienced in their young lives. And learning more about this subject and contributing to the conversation is important to everyone that I work with.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Marone. I live in Westchester County. I'm here for invitation to this meeting, and thank you for that. I'm a lobbyist in the Capitol, and I work on anti-trafficking legislation. And it's one of the things I want to talk about this morning. We're trying to get passed in Albany.
I've enjoyed getting to know you, Vince, and a lot of folks like you that are working on this and have been working on this for years. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jalis Diaz. I am from the YWCA of White Plains in Central Westchester. I am also here on the invitation to the assemblyman. Thank you very much for including us on the conversation. And we're happy to learn and assist in whatever ways that we can to help educate the community and the youth on how to read signs and find victims and help them get help.
And what is your service area?
We're White Plains and Central Westchester, so we hit a big portion of Westchester right in the center.
That's great.
So we hit a lot of different districts.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And I think someone just sat down.
Yes, sir. Hi. Matt Schaefer, State Police. I work out of Habershaw Barracks.
Pleasure, Matt. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mike Iaposi. I'm the Commissioner for the Ulster County Department of Social Services. I became involved in trafficking around 2015 when we joined the Office of Children and Family Services Safe Harbor program. And basically I've been working on the subject matter area in Ulster County, raising awareness, building infrastructure for services for persons that are involved in trafficking activities. And I'm here at the invitation of the Assemblyman, so thank you for that. And we look forward to hearing about what's going on elsewhere in the Hudson Valley region.
Thank you for being here. And just a quick plug, your office has been great. When our staff has needed to reach out to help some folks, Ulster's been great, so thank you.
Right back at you. Thank you for reaching out and listening to what we have to say.
Sure.
And I am Darnette Davis, and I'm the Director of KidsNet Child Care Program right here in Spring Valley. I'm also a trustee for the Finklestein Memorial Library, and I'm here to take away for the village of Spring Valley and the library, of course. And of course, we know that human trafficking is plaguing the entire community. And because this community is a low-income community, it's right here in Spring Valley. And I will benefit from it, and I will send it right back to the community. Thank you for having me.
Apologies, what was your first name again?
Darnette Davis.
Darnette. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Good morning, I'm Lisette Reyes. I am a Child Protective Services Supervisor here in Rockland County. I do supervise the Special Victims Unit of our CPS office. And oftentimes in our work, we do intersect with children and families who have been touched by human trafficking in many different forms. I also coordinate the Safe Harbor program here in Rockland County. So I do appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to interface with you all and learn as much as I can today.
So Safe Harbor in Rockland isn't a separate nonprofit, it's within social services?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Michelle Rosenberg. I'm the grade A supervisor, and I oversee all the child protective services for the county as well as the adolescent unit. So we do see often a lot of cases that do intersect with the trafficking. Our director received the invitation this morning. She unfortunately is in another conference up in Troy. So she did ask that we come here, collect information, and be able to, benefit from the conversation and bring information back.
I'm going to have a specific question for you at one of the breakouts. I'm glad you're here.
Great.
Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Mills. I'm the Senior Anti-Trafficking Program Manager at My Sister's Place out of Westchester County. My Sister's Place is a regional service provider for survivors of human trafficking. We work with adult survivors of both sex and labor trafficking, providing comprehensive case management services and legal services. If we do have a minor who presents to us, we'll refer them to Safe Harbor in Westchester County. And yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Obviously, I work with survivors every day, so I'm hoping to advocate for them as well as hopefully learn something new.
Amanda, what's your catch area that you represent?
Westchester County and surrounding areas, quite honestly, anyone from New York State, we were funded by the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA, so we work to get them survivors confirmed under New York State law as survivors. So we really can service anyone from New York State. However, there are plenty of awesome service providers around New York State, so if there's someone closer, we'll refer them to them. But primarily Westchester and New York City is our client base.
Thank you. I was going to ask that specific about New York City and how you might be able to. Okay. Sylvia?
Good morning, Sylvia Letterman. I'm the Managing Director of the Center for Legal Services at My Sister's Place. Very much appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to raise awareness. Obviously, I have brought the subject matter expert, so I am looking to learn and listen. And again, thank you very much for hosting us today.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning, I'm Patricia Hansen. I'm an investigator with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I'm also a TFO with Homeland Security. So a few of my cases right now involve human trafficking, so that's why I'm here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for being here.
Good morning, I'm investigator Stella Martini out of the Rhinebeck Barracks. Just here to further my knowledge on the topic.
Thank you.
How you doing? Captain John Shaughnessy, BCI Captain for Troop K, which covers Westchester, Putnam, Rockland, and Dutchess County. And I oversee about 90 investigators for the state police.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning. My name is Brittany Kessel. I'm from the Dutchess County District Attorney's Office. I work in the Special Victims Unit, so this is right in our wheelhouse. So I'm just happy to be here this morning, and thank you for the invitation. Happy to learn and see how everyone else is dealing with these issues throughout the state. Thank you.
Robert Tandy, Putnam County District Attorney. I'm here on the invitation of the Assemblyman, and I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to sharing my experiences and ideas with you.
Thank you, sir. And we will have Congressman Lawler here for a little bit this morning. When he comes in, I'll have him introduce himself. We are going to, typically, we have kind of at the moment, decide if we're going to do like breakout groups or all be at the same table. We've been kind of on a run with just kind of everybody sitting here. The breakout sessions have been cool because we get a lot.
Oh, thank God, because I was about to do it. I wasn't this close. I swear I was that close.
Well,
scared me.
I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you.
It's a good icebreaker.
Yeah. I had no idea what was happening for a second. I just saw a hand come here, and I didn't know what was going on. And the news is here. I didn't know what was going to happen.
All right, on that note.
What were you saying, Brian?
I don't know what I was saying.
Saved my life there.
All right, icebreaker. We like it. Anyway, in a nutshell, we're going to stick together, and I'm going to do my best to identify who's in the room, utilize our previous roundtables to see who might be not talking that I might point out and say, hey, curious about you based on your role. Really want to hear from everybody, and I just feel like everybody is going to be able to have something to say on each of the topics as opposed to splitting up and not getting a certain level of experience on a particular topic. So we're all going to hang out here. We're going to time it, about 20 minutes per each topic. When we hit the first one, just as a warning, we typically get some feedback on training and the school districts and education. Let's save that for topic 4. So with the first topic, where we're going to hear and talk about how can New York strengthen support for survivors and communities, those preventative through PSAs and whatnot, we're going to save that conversation for topic 4. So the first question to the group is, how can New York strengthen support for survivors and communities? And I'd love to start with our nonprofit folks that are in the room. Amanda, maybe if you want to kick us off on what you see as some of the biggest issues that you believe need to be strengthened in order to provide support for survivors and the communities.
I think the first is something you've probably heard before, but more funding.
Sure.
For service providers who provide case management, legal services, whatever it might be to survivors. We service all of Westchester County and surrounding areas, and we are a team of 2. So, more funding would definitely help to increase case manager capacity and caseload. And in turn, obviously, survivors often come to us with absolutely, nothing, no money in their back pocket, no food for them and their families. And so, client assistance funding is definitely helpful if we could, get them some groceries or another very big need is housing, safe housing, sustainable housing for survivors who are coming out of their trafficking experience, who have nowhere to go, who may or may not qualify for, benefits, things like that, whether it be due to their immigration status or if they have a job and their income is just a couple dollars over. It's definitely difficult to try and find, obviously we partner with, YWCA, we partner with so many different community partners to try and help with things like that. But at the end of the day, if we had more funding, we'd be able to provide more services and assistance. And I think communities, we know that trafficking can happen to anyone, but vulnerable populations are more susceptible to trafficking. So really addressing things like poverty and just kind of inequity overall in communities and trying to address that, which would then decrease vulnerabilities and vulnerable populations from, being trafficked. And overall, I think just representing trafficking as it actually is in the media and things like that, because it's often through this very one-sided lens of this is what trafficking is, and so survivors don't see themselves represented in the media. And so then they don't know that they're survivors, so then they don't seek help. They see, movies like Taken, for instance. I think we all know the Liam Neeson movie, and they look at that and they're like, well, I wasn't kidnapped. This wasn't me, so I'm not a survivor of trafficking. So then they don't seek services because they don't identify with being a human trafficking survivor. We see labor trafficking so often underrepresented in the media as well. And so I think just bringing awareness to what trafficking really is, what it looks like in our communities, addressing those vulnerabilities, and overall just providing more support to the nonprofits that are servicing our survivors.
So a couple follow-ups. One, we've asked this for all of our nonprofits. After we leave here, and this is for everybody, this isn't a discussion that just ends. We're not going to solve this problem in 2 hours. Send us specific items. Send us specific cases of housing issues. Send us ideas that you have on how to better frame and get rid of the stigma. A quick question for you. When it comes to My Sister's Place, and you talked about 2 individuals, is that specific to trafficking, or are you also serving domestic violence victims, and is it put together? Can you speak to that dynamic?
Yeah, so My Sister's Place as a whole serves both survivors of trafficking and domestic violence. The 2-person team is just for our anti-trafficking program. Okay. And so the rest, we obviously partner with other programs. We work very closely with our Center for Legal Services. We're kind of housed under that with our family and immigration law. And they serve, intimate partner violence and trafficking survivors. There is an overlap. That's why our program was created, the anti-trafficking program, because we do see an overlap of domestic violence and human trafficking. Most survivors know their trafficker on a personal level. Sometimes it's a partner, it's a parent, it's a family member, it's a friend. And so we do see that overlap, so sometimes we do work with our domestic violence advocates. However, our advocates on the domestic violence in the programs kind of do what we do, but for trafficking survivors. We're just, funded differently, but we do work together, obviously, as a whole, in general as an agency. But yeah, the anti-trafficking program is run by myself, and I have a small caseload, and then we have a bilingual case manager who speaks Spanish and English. But yeah, it's just us.
Thank you.
Amanda, give me an idea of, specific to the human trafficking caseload, an idea of, on a yearly basis, how many people that you're servicing. And can you give an idea of maybe age range too?
Yeah, so I'm currently pulling our report now, so I don't have an exact number for you, but we're looking at about 60 clients served within the past year.
Okay.
Our case manager started in December last year, so, if you kind of look at that with just myself for that time period. So about 60 clients served. Age range, like I said before, we serve adult survivors, so honestly we have anywhere from 18, 19 to 60, 70. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessarily like a majority of, from one. It's very varied.
And just one last follow-up, and then, but out of that roughly 60 per year, you mentioned, I think it's a great thing to have somebody who is bilingual. How many of the 60 that have been served are, say, English as a second language individuals that you're serving?
I believe the number, if I'm remembering correctly, a little bit over 60%
Okay.
are Spanish speaking.
Thank you.
And then we have
Spanish.
a couple that are other language speaking, and then the rest are English speaking.
Thank you.
Absolutely, good.
Amanda, forgive me if for forgetting, but you talked about housing before. Does my sister's place run a shelter?
Yes, we
And
have a.
can you talk about the funding apparatus for your reimbursement on that shelter?
Sylvia?
I
I'm going to
can
pass
address
that over to Sylvia. We do have a shelter,
A
yes.
little bit. So we do have one shelter in a confidential location. It is, basically, it's an emergency
Mhm.
shelter. It's small. We only have 21 beds,
Mhm.
and we are always full.
Mhm.
As far as our funding goes, the majority of our funding at my sister's place is grant funded, mostly federal, state, county grants, private donations, foundations, and then there's also a state reimbursement on at the shelter. So basically getting a per diem for beds filled. So that leads into, like, anytime you talk about, I think, domestic violence and human trafficking, there's so many, like, different veins then of where we go with that. So we do get reimbursed, excuse me, for beds filled. That's part of why we have a curfew. People are like, oh, well, that's not, very humane to have a curfew for adults, but that is part of why we have a curfew at the shelter, to ensure that we are actually filling our beds. If our beds are not filled, then we don't get paid for them. That doesn't mean that our residents and clients can't leave for the weekend or go visit family or vacations or whatever, but that's the basic, the funding stream of the shelter.
And I raised that only because, and I probably should have led with this, but my wife serves on the board for the Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center. And the biggest complaint she comes home with every month from their board meeting is the reimbursement rate that they're getting for their shelter. And so I just didn't know, and I didn't know if my colleagues were aware of the disconnect that's there from the provider's standpoint. And so I was just hoping that you could share that with us a little bit more, but I appreciate the input. Thank you.
So let's talk about that, right? So you have to get funding, and who, is that the state portion of the funding that's per diem, that's based on the beds?
Yes.
So if you have someone who, on that particular night, does not make curfew, you don't get funding for that particular bed on that day? How does that work? Is it monthly, weekly?
It's really daily.
Daily.
It's daily. It's a per diem, so it's on a daily basis.
So we might agree that we probably should look at how that funding exists and maybe rethink a little bit?
That would be awesome. I do have to say, now it's several years ago, our former CEO, Karen Cheeks Lomax, fought very hard. I don't know if it was at the state legislative level or not, but we had always accepted undocumented immigrants in our shelter, and for many years we were not getting paid for those shelter stays, and that has now changed. So we appreciate that, but and not to focus on funding. Funding is a focus for like every nonprofit every single day, not only on reimbursement rates, but reimbursements just in coming to us in a timely manner. Government, the voucher system, and in many cases, we get grants approved and we are not getting reimbursement despite having submitted everything, in many cases, for months and months. So we're then going into either reserves or lines of credit and then paying interest on that, and that's a problem.
So, two things on that. One, please send this committee an example of that, the timeliness and the reimbursements in general, as much information as you can from an advocacy standpoint. The second, talk to whoever would be your person at the state level to try to hurry that process up. I know we've done that. Yeah, you do? Okay, good.
We try to be nice about it.
It's not easy, and you can't always get a whim, just making sure you're doing that.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
good.
Thank you.
No problem. I had a follow-up for Michelle. I was very interested. I know that Amanda was talking about a lot of individuals that they have as clients that are adult, I don't want to say adult age. Would that be accurate? So from a children's standpoint, the interactions that you see related to this specific topic, can you speak to it?
Well, there's definitely a tool where when they are identified, when a child is, because we deal with anyone under the age of 18, they are identified, we refer out. We refer to Center for Safety and Change. And for Rockland County, they're the domestic violence advocates in the county, and their waiting lists are way too long. We're definitely seeing a need for Spanish-speaking, bilingual therapists, clinicians that have specialized in this type of issue from that perspective, but that's after they're identified. So we really deal with trying to get to disclosure. And we definitely are needing resources for that, to make children comfortable enough to speak. Once they're identified, like I said, we pass them along, but what we're really dealing with is trying to make the child comfortable enough to make a disclosure. Lizette here works with the special victims, so she handles the safe harbor because just because a child's sexually abused doesn't mean they're a victim of trafficking, but anyone who is trafficked is a victim of sexual abuse. So that's why we have her team kind of is the one that will be on all the meetings. She also is on the adolescent review board meetings, which is something we hold because the adolescents are really being, there's a huge issue with gangs in Rockland County. I don't know if people think we're such a small county, but the issue with gangs and these adolescent youth, males being labor trafficked and the females being sex trafficked is really becoming an issue that we have been identifying in every single case that we do have through Department of Social Services. There are these trafficking tools we use to see if they're identified, if they have rapid indicators, which I think, I don't know if everyone here is aware of that. They are identified, we do a more comprehensive breakdown of what it is, and then all those clients or those youths do refer over to Center for Safety and Change, where they get group therapy, individual therapy. There's things we have in this county, but like I said, I think the key is making them comfortable enough to actually speak with the caseworker and tell their story, enough for us to identify and give them appropriate resources.
And you're saying there's an issue in terms of staffing and available folks that can translate and create that connection at the social worker aspect?
So they're definitely being under-identified, but when it is identified and then we go ahead and make the appropriate referral to them for services, they shouldn't be waiting 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Where do they wait?
For Center for Safety and Change, because there's very few, very limited clinicians that identify and specialize in this type of therapy.
I've got some follow-ups. Does anybody else have anything for? Yeah, okay.
If I may, we're also nearing a wait list right now because we're at capacity, and so I know that Center for Safety and Change is kind of like our sister agency almost, providing a lot of the same services on the other side. Yeah, I think that would likely come down to funding as well for more case management.
As an example, you have an issue with a youth that is being victimized, maybe by a parent. They're taken out of that situation, they're put into a foster home. Is that typically what happens, or are there different options on where the child goes?
Oh, no, so we're very strength-based, so depending on what the situation is, that scenario can be played out in many different ways. Is it an intimate partner of the parents? Is it a relative? Was the parent aware of it? If the parent wasn't aware of it, we get cases all the time where something's happening to a child, but the parent had no idea. So they're not responsible for what they don't know, especially an adolescent youth who's sneaking out of the home at night. If it's a younger child, where they're being victimized by the parent, we need to make a safety plan, report intervention, which is what we try to do that as last possible, we look for family first. It's always family first. Can anyone known to the child, a best friend's parent, we've had school teachers come up. Foster care is the last resort. That is if there are zero resources possible.
How often do you see foster care being the endpoint?
It happens. We do better with direct custody, is what we call with family resources. unfortunate. We have had a huge uptick with the undocumented community because there are minors being sent here. They are being sent over to people that we don't know. They're crossing through Texas, and then they're just, identifying someone who's a relative that has never met them before. They're being victimized that way. So when there's zero resources, then it's foster
Then it's
care.
where you gotta go.
I want to say total, we have 70 children in foster care.
I would love if you could follow up with that number for us so that we can look into that. And on cue, before we keep going with it, actually, this is kind of moving on to our next topic. Does anyone have a final, as a nonprofit provider, or anyone else here, just comments specific to strengthening support for survivors and communities?
If I could,
Sure, go ahead.
Just a few points, and I'll be brief, but just into the weeds of how some of these different processes that trafficking survivors might go through. So on the state level, where there's the confirmation process that Amanda mentioned, there are federal processes also. For minors, they can be issued an eligibility letter, or for adults, a certification letter. Those federal processes, once they have that letter, that does not equal that someone is on a path to having firm legal status. So there's a misalignment, in my opinion, of all of these different processes at the state and federal level, and then also with USCIS, so that the person can have the eligibility letter or certification letter, which actually gives them access to a whole range of services and benefits, but they are in limbo of ever having permanent legal status.
That's a really good topic that I want to touch on more and dive into in the third discussion point.
Yeah, we'll circle
I
back.
really want to circle back to that.
And just one other
Sure.
thing to round this out. The eligibility and certification letters do open people up to being treated in the eyes of social services as though they were a refugee. However, refugee services are at or over capacity.
Sure.
So there are waiting lists, and there's just not enough services. There was obviously almost a complete defunding of resettlement agencies under the last administration federally, and so we've been clawing our way back to get back to capacity, and we're not quite there yet. So it really needs investment in resettlement agencies so that trafficking victims can be served.
Okay, that's an important piece of information, especially on that topic. Just send us any information, particulars on that you can, all right?
Happy to.
Before we move on, is there anyone else who had a comment on that topic? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Assemblyman. I think collaboration here obviously is the key. I mean, the funding is not always optimal. School districts do have these resources for school-aged children. We have counselors on staff, as you know. And as I said before, we need to be part of the solution. So if there's anything that we can collectively do between school districts, county, state, federal, whatever, we have them in our buildings every day. So we can really, really make that impact and make sure that we're hearing their needs, and then coordinate with the service providers to make sure that they're able to provide those services. So that might be one way to take a look at it, again, that collaborative effort.
Absolutely, and from my experience working on this particular issue and just individuals that are high risk in the first place, you guys typically have an employee and or employees that serve directly with they used to have this identified by free lunches, but
yes.
So do you have like a homeless liaison? Do you have several folks
We
that
have counselors that work in that area.
Yeah, and each district will have a homeless liaison person designated for that, in that role. So that's true with all districts. I appreciate hearing from the experts on the question of how to help survivors in communities. And my understanding is that it's about two questions: what do they need most, and what do they need first? And I think that there will be varieties or variations with each case to answer those questions. What do they need most? What do they need first? And school districts do have trained professionals, but this particular issue of human trafficking and its victims and the victims it creates, we may need some greater assistance there in arriving at that cutting edge so that we can do really targeted counseling and do it well. So that's I think, a question for later.
Correct, yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just two things really quickly. One thing that I've noticed as we've traveled around the state that I think is one of the most satisfying things about putting this task force together is to your point about collaboration, Dr. Bonk. I mean, you might not all know each other, but what we found is that when we break at the end, there's a lot of conversation going back, a lot of business cards being exchanged, a lot of plans, and that in and of itself is very valuable. The one thing I'd say as to sum up on this question that really impacted me was at one of our sessions last week in Syracuse. One of the gentlemen who was a service provider said, it's really critically important that we have the resources to be able to provide a reasonable alternative to the victim. If we can't provide the housing, if we can't provide the counseling and the services and the food and the clothing in some instances or anything, or if there are such long waiting lists that it essentially is not really something that can be provided, we're not going to be able to really impact that person's life. They're going to go back to, because their trafficker is somebody that they perceive as the person that has met those needs, even though it's incredibly damaging and dysfunctional. But, so anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
Amanda.
for sure.
If I may, just super quickly off of that, I once had a survivor say to me, like, it would be a lot easier to just go back, because at least I know I would have a roof over my head, I would have a meal in front of me, and I would have my basic needs met. And that has always stuck with me, because it's true. If we can't provide those, they have no other choice, and they see that as a safe space, no matter what other victimization might have happened to them.
So this is what we've heard and what we have said and what we are hoping for is that there are some individuals that you are serving or have served that would be willing to step up and provide a testimonial, because as we make legislative recommendations, as we make recommendations for increase of funding for nonprofits like yours, putting a face and a story to it is going to be very impactful. So where folks are able to and willing to do that, we really would love that. And we're going to touch back on this on topic 4. Before we go on to our next topic item, I want to allow our Congressman, Mike Lawler, to say a few words and introduce himself.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to my former colleague, Mary Beth Walsh, for being here, and to our other Assembly members, Brian Marr, John McGowan, and Matt Slater, for really spearheading this effort and bringing everybody together today. I think, obviously, the issue of human trafficking is one that unfortunately has become a more important topic of discussion as we've seen the explosion of migrants crossing the southern border, and obviously many people being victim to this horrific practice. And, you know, as I went down to Eagle Pass back in January and met with Border Patrol. This is one of the topics that we discussed extensively with them. And obviously, when people are coming here and being trafficked, women, children, being abused, being forced into prostitution potentially. These are significant challenges that I think as a country we need to deal with, and nobody should be in that circumstance. I think our nonprofit organizations really do a phenomenal job trying to serve these folks who are victims and trying to help them through the process. Obviously, when you're talking about the resources that we are allocating and spending and the impact that it has on municipalities, on school districts, on nonprofit organizations, you know, this is a real challenge across the spectrum. And certainly, I think we can all acknowledge this system as it's currently structured does not work and needs to be fixed. Obviously, all of us are empathetic to the fact that most people who come to the United States are doing so because they are seeking a better life, they are seeking opportunity, they are seeking safety. And obviously that is something that we are cognizant of. But the volume that has occurred over the last 3.5 years in particular has really put stress on the system. It's put stress on our nonprofit organizations to be able to provide the services. It's put stress on our municipalities. The state is spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money across the spectrum when it comes to housing, when it comes to clothing, when it comes to food, when it comes to education. We've had districts in my congressional district that have taken in thousands of migrant students and obviously are trying to address the circumstances best they can. But across the board, this whole system needs to change. And I think, obviously, human trafficking is a major component of this, whether you're talking about individuals engaged in the practice or if it's tied to the larger cartel network, especially south of the border. These are things that we have to aggressively combat, I think, both in terms of the changes that we need to make in the law, the funding, but also in terms of how we interface with our neighboring countries and really forcing them to help crack down on the cartels and the practice of human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun trafficking. This is a significant challenge that is creating real problems in our country and certainly for innocent people who are falling victim to this. So I think this is an extremely important topic. It doesn't get necessarily as much attention as it should when we have this broader, immigration discussion. But I think you're doing important work by having these task force hearings across the state and really bringing providers together with government officials, with law enforcement, and school districts to really try and tackle this in a meaningful way to help those who need it, but also highlighting what a crisis this really is. So I appreciate the opportunity to stop by and join you in part.
No problem. And we know your time is limited. We appreciate you being here, and just your presence as a member of Congress honestly elevates our conversation. So we appreciate that. Also, as members of law enforcement know, a lot of the statutes are federal statutes. A lot of the prosecutions are at the federal level, and you have to work with your federal partners. For our next topic of what coordination and tools do law enforcement and prosecutors need to better combat traffickers and help victims, would love for you to give us everything in your capacity here, but also any collaborations at the federal level that you want to speak to while we have the congressman, because I know he'll be leaving us shortly. Anyone who wants to kick us off?
I will. I'm going to deal mostly with the topic of prostitution, not the whole wide topic of human trafficking, because I've been dealing in Putnam County, much to my dismay and shock and surprise, with prostitution in the last several years, something that was not an issue when I moved here 28 years ago. We've had instances of police officers or a police officer taking prostitutes into the police station at night, protecting those prostitutes during the day. Those prostitutes all came from Queens. From Queens, they came from south of the border. They were all trafficked in here. They were all brought here. And they are being used as sex slaves. And the one thing I want to point out, how did this happen? And it's happened, it really has exploded, and as the congressman said, in the last 3.5 years. Shockingly, it really has exploded. I want to read to you something from the U.S. Office of Inspector General, because when I read this, I was astonished. So we're talking about coordination, and I'm glad we're all here discussing this today from the state, because you're not getting coordination from the federal government. Listen to this. This is the opening page of the Inspector General's report. Although U.S. Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement have policies and procedures to check the identity of non-citizens seeking entry into the United States, they cannot always verify the non-citizens' identities. According to federal law, non-citizens without identification are not admissible into the country and shall be detained. However, ICE officials are permitted to release non-citizens into the United States based on various considerations. I'll get to that in a minute. Prior to releasing these individuals, ICE immigration officers accept self-reported biographical information, which they use to issue various immigration forms. They are being flooded at the southern border. And the various considerations are basically, because I've spoken to the ICE agents, do you have a story to tell us? Can you give us a name? Can you give us a general location? They don't check it. They just want to know, can you speak 4 or 5 coherent sentences to me that says you're going somewhere? And they let them go.
Can I just add one thing to that? That is 100% correct. When we went down to Eagle Pass, what Custom and Border Patrol told us is that they are, under this administration, they are directed to ask certain questions to prod certain answers.
Correct.
And if they get those answers, they are then processed and released into the United States. The worst part about it is they check 4 databases. If they're able to verify that the individual who they say they are through the 4 databases, fine, then they've verified it. If they don't, and that person gave them the name, say, John Smith, they assume that person is John
That's
Smith,
correct.
even if they have not verified it.
That's right. And the tragedy of this, I mean, it's easy to say the border sucks, we got to fix it. The tragedy is that these people they're being lost. They're disappearing. And so many of them are winding up prostituting themselves. I always ask the question, who here wanted to grow up being a prostitute? If you did, raise your hand. Nobody wants to be a prostitute. Nobody wants to do this kind of work, if you want to call it work. But we've created a system in our country where we're inviting human sex trafficking into our country. I mean, we had a problem before as it is, but the last 4 or 5 years has just been terrible. And so one of the things, since we're not going to get help from the federal government, which is just not, one of the things I think we should take a look at, and it's a little dicey, but it's New York State, it's called the Equality Model, Senate Bill SS 1352. It's the Sex Trade Survivors Justice and Equality Act. It's a bill that would, to a certain extent, decriminalize prostitution, expand access to social services for those in the sex trade, strengthen laws against trafficking, and advance criminal justice reform for survivors of the sex trade. It would certainly impact the not-for-profits here today. Now, when I say decriminalize prostitution, I'm not talking about legalizing prostitution. Making the government a caring pimp does nothing to combat sexual exploitation, does nothing to combat the sexual exploitation that is prostitution. But this bill, which has been proposed, I think it's in committee now, but I'm not sure.
It passed the Senate, it didn't pass the Assembly.
Okay, it has some flaws. It has some real flaws. But the mindset of the bill is in the right place. They recognize that the prostitutes, and a lot of the prostitutes are child prostitutes. They are simply victims. And we're not going to demonize them and arrest them and solve the problem. We have to treat them as if they were drug addicts or anybody else that has something that they're not in control of. And in this case, they're not in control of what they do because they're being told what to do. They're scared to death of being thrown back to the country where they came from because, believe it or not, it was worse there. And they don't know what to do. So I think somebody here said they keep their mouths shut. They just want to be left alone. And it's a weird mindset. We had a case a couple of weeks ago where we took down a prostitution house in Putnam County. And I take kind of personal responsibility for this mistake because we were part of the investigation. They made the arrest of the person who was running the house. They let all the prostitutes go. Now, I'm not saying they should have been arrested. They let them go really an act of kindness. They should have detained them and questioned them and given them information as to where they can go, what they can do to seek help, what nonprofits are available for them. But instead, they just let them go to do what? They went back to wherever they are. They're just going to be trafficked somewhere else. So unless we get a handle on what's going on at the border, We're gonna have to do this in-house in the state. And I think that bill is a pretty good way to start, to let people know that this is really a serious, horrible problem for these victims of crime. Prostitutes are crime victims. And we need to recognize that and treat it and such. And we do need to have more funding for the not-for-profits, because God, who else is gonna do this work? What you guys are doing, you're really angels on the earth. What you're doing for these people is incredible. And I know people who've started doing it, you know what they do? They're like, I can't do that. I can't do that. And if you're sticking with it, God bless you. You're really doing great work.
So Bob, just help me understand this, because we've heard about the equality model. We've heard about the aspect of it where you decriminalize prostitution, but then you gave an example of a raid where the individuals were not detained, they were let go, and they weren't able to get the services, you weren't able to get the information. So wouldn't decriminalizing lead to more examples of that happening?
No, when I say decriminalizing, what I mean is to treat the person who's responsible for using the prostitute much more severely. The person who's responsible for trafficking the prostitute much more severely. They can still be hit with a B misdemeanor or a violation or whatever, but when I became an ADA in 1989, and we'd have the night shift at Raymond Courts, you'd have hundreds of prostitutes come in, and after a while, bail was being set on them. They were treated as if they were drug dealers. And it kind of, you saw these poor women, they didn't want to be prostitutes. They need to be educated, well, law enforcement needs to be educated so we can inform them of what's available to them out there. I'm not a big fan on starting government agencies again. This bill does create a huge government agency. The costs are impossible it's not gonna happen. But as I said, the mindset behind it is a very good starting point. And I think it's a great way to have a bipartisan discussion as to how we can really try to fix this problem, as opposed to taking sides, which I don't understand on an issue like this. I don't know how politics comes into this at all, but it does.
It does, and not gonna take this whole time because there's so many more topics and so many people that I want to hear from. But I want to personally pick your brain after this on that one.
Sure.
Because I have a lot of questions on it.
Thanks.
The equality model. Okay, obviously when we talk about law enforcement, we've already heard about gangs having issues here in Rockland County. My colleagues and I understand the impact Raise the Age has had on that. I'd really like to get law enforcement's opinion on things like the discovery laws that have been put in place, bail reform, Raise the Age, and how that has contributed.
Really
I do. We do, because typically, someone like yourself will say something, but we'll learn something new every time, so please.
Well, obviously, the discovery laws, when they first came out, I was lieutenant in narcotics, we thought it was gonna be the end of everything, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as we thought, right? It was just getting the stuff to the courts quicker than it would be in a case. So it wasn't, we dealt with it, right? We got the dems, we put them in a folder. I was pretty decent with that. But basically, the bail reform is killing us. In a nutshell, you know, we grab a guy with a kilo of cocaine and we bring him in, he gets 18 before the paperwork is done. And he's back on the street doing that with the money, and then you talk drugs, turns into prostitution, turns into all this stuff. It's not just one thing is this, right? So when we do operations like social media is where a lot of this prostitution's happening. It's all Backpage and all those stuff that they can go on. It's no longer, you know, in the old days you pull up to the corner and a girl goes to the car. Certain places it is, but it's all on social media now. So we'll set up in a place, we'll have the Johns come in, or we'll set up the thing, and a lot of the times, a lot of them we're running into now, believe it or not, are professional. Like, you know, they don't want to cooperate. They don't. The penalty for them is really, it's not that stiff. Decriminalized. We're almost there, right?
Right.
It's pretty much there now. No one's really. These girls aren't going to jail, like,
Right.
and they shouldn't, right?
Right.
They shouldn't be going to jail. But you have to identify. You identify it at the lowest level of prostitution, right? You're going to identify it and be able to identify when somebody's a victim and be able to ask the right questions. And the crime victim people that we have in the state police, and then referring them to the crime victim person. And, you know, this is all well and good, you just got to get up to the higher level, right? The guy that's doing the trafficking, right? And then usually that's on the higher level, right? And you guys everybody talked about, oh, you know, the girls are coming across the border and the bad guys are coming across the border. Let's be honest. The bad guys are coming across the border. He could be 10 people in front of that group of people that came in, and they're going to meet him in New York City or in Texas, wherever they're going to meet him, right? Everybody, Everybody wants to glance over that the majority of this problem is coming from the borders, right? I mean, it's a 9,000-pound gorilla in the room, right? No one wants it. They're just letting people in. It's dangerous. You got people that are terrorists, you got people that are traffickers of narcotics, traffickers of people, traffickers of children coming in. And like, we're at state level, you can do as much as you can do till you go to the federal level, right? So teaming up with HSI and doing stuff like that and taking to a higher level helps. Having the federal, I'll be totally honest with you, a lot of times we deal with district attorneys and we just take cases federal right off the bat because we know the penalties for the state is
Right.
Nothing. Correct.
I want to hit on that. So obviously.
We do the same thing. We send them to the feds.
So, but to get to that point of very important piece of information, especially when it comes to legislative recommendations and this issue of human trafficking, we would love for any sort of advice and thoughts on the increase in penalties and the ability to prosecute. One area we heard throughout the state was in district attorney's offices specifically because of discovery, because of all these aspects of the case itself, that there is just not enough resources if we even increase the statutes to just put it on the DAs and law enforcement and say, okay, we've increased the crimes, now do your job. There's the resources that are equal to being able to do your job aren't there as well. Is that something you're seeing?
Yes, and this is funny, but it's not funny. The governor came out with an initiative for the state, organized retail theft. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
So you're gonna put millions and millions and millions of dollars, all right, we're gonna talk, right? That's what we're doing here, right? We're gonna put millions and millions of dollars into organized retail theft. I've got more manpower hours in organized retail theft, and the amount of money in overtime compared to the amount of money we're taking is insane. If you saw the amount of money we're wasting, hey, my guys are gonna get good retirements, great, right? Good pensions, great. But guess what? It's not doing anything. You take that money and put it into maybe human trafficking. Maybe something that is not trying to get elected next year. Maybe it's something that can, really help the community, right? Like, a lot of this stuff is just window dressing, right? We're going to look at cannabis enforcement, and we're going to do organized retail theft. Come on. What do we do? What do we do? Cannabis enforcement?
That's 100%. I mean,
100%.
we're talking, we had, the changes to bail reform to make it, better. It wasn't better, it was window dressing, right? The most recent initiatives, and we debated that and everything. It's not hitting on the issues that we need to hit on. It's not addressing the real problem areas. Yeah, the retail theft, you have robbery statutes, you have grand larceny statutes, right? So you already have laws on the books, right? But instead, it's politically motivated to come up with things that, are not addressing the true victims of crime. So it's 100%. I just say I left the DA's office in 2017, and looking at what it is now compared to like when I left, you didn't have these discovery statutes, you didn't have these additional requirements to comply with. That just makes it that much more difficult. And the resources, I think the line items in the budgets have been like $100,000 for the state, like outside of New York City, to address for both public defenders' offices as well as DAs. And that's not where the burden is. The burden is on the DA's office and the prosecuting agencies. So it's very frustrating for us as we're seeing that and then hearing what you're saying. It's tough to this culture and this environment in the state when it comes to resources for law enforcement and trying to fix these things has been a challenge.
Well, there's resources for law enforcement, but it's in the wrong direction.
Correct.
That's the thing. Like, you want to tackle the problem, why don't you go to the source and ask the cops that are doing it? Right. To say, hey, what do you think is the biggest problem? Because you're asking me what the biggest problem is. Westchester, Columbia, Putnam, and Dutchess County. I'll tell you a different thing than they'll tell you in Shenango County and out in Buffalo. They'll tell you different things. Why don't you go, everybody sees the flash mob and taking all the coach pocketbooks. Okay. Right? But, no one wants to see like the other stuff that we say, hey, no, we have a real problem with fentanyl.
Right.
We have a real problem with children dying at fentanyl overdose. We have a real problem with this. We have a real problem with that. Well, we're going to do organized retail theft. We're going to arrest people that, the majority of stuff I see on my stuff now is juveniles that don't even get arrested. You know what I mean? And we AT all these people left and right. And the DA's offices are overburdened. What are the ADAs going to do? They're like, yeah, dude, here's a $50 fine. Go, right? And they want to turn it into bigger investigations and stuff. And all this stuff is, everybody doesn't want to know. All this stuff is interrelated. Theft and these theft rings and the child trafficking and the narcotics and the fentanyl is all together. right? You could, a big umbrella, and you could put everything in there, because I can guarantee the people that are in traffic are doing organized retail theft, organized by someone to do organized retail theft.
Absolutely.
Or they're organized to do narcotics sales, or they're organized to do sex sales, right? It's all interrelated, you know, so you have to combat the problem. You have to get stricter laws in New York State. Bail reform's nonsense. It has to get stricter. You have to make penalties for people when they commit crimes, okay? Because damn right, they're gonna come after you, and they're gonna come after you, and they're gonna come after you and me if I commit a crime, right? And they're gonna put us on TV. He did this and he did that. Let's change it. Let's show the bad guys are bad guys. And I'm not talking about low-level people. I'm talking about people that are bad guys. We all know who bad guys are. 3-time felons, guys with got gun collars, and a serious assaults that are walking out on the street. You know, this poor guy, the poor cop that possibly got jumped in New York City by the undocumented people down there, right? And these guys walked out laughing and giving the camera all these stuff, and oh, it's okay, it's all right. No, it's not all right. Put them on a bus and get them out. I mean, let's be honest. What are we doing? We're pumping billions of dollars. Who said it over here? I might be running on, but billions of dollars into what? Into what? Into things that we keep putting people back on the street, back on the street, back on the street. No, put them back on a bus and go bye-bye. You're not a citizen of the United States and you're causing problems. The Venezuelan gangs in Times Square, terrorizing. Times Square was a beautiful place. Remember? Back in the day it wasn't. Now it's a beautiful place. Not anymore. Not anymore, because you're letting people come here that all they want to do come here is do bad things, right? So I think it has to start on a level, state level, and increase the penalties for these crimes that people are committing. And you'll see a decrease in sex trafficking. You'll see a decrease in fentanyl overdose. You'll see a decrease in everything across the board when people get held accountable for their actions. Our kids are held accountable for their actions, right? No violence policy in school. My kid got punched in the face to defend himself. No violence policy in school. You get, mom, dad. I'm like, hey, you don't want to hear it. You know, we held them accountable. Let's hold people accountable. I think we solved this problem. It's not that hard. Trust me. Make laws tougher, arrest people, put them in jail, and the things will get better. Trust me. We've seen it before. Broken windows down in Giuliani, New York City. We've seen it. You know.
At the end of the day, part of the challenge that we're dealing with as a country is that there is a lack of consequences for actions, period. That's where we have gone over the last decade legislatively. And when you have, for instance, in New York City, it's not just raise the age where 16 and 17-year-olds are being treated in family court rather than criminal court, even if they're using a gun in the commission of a crime. But when New York City tries to decriminalize jumping a turnstile, for instance, so the MTA loses $700 billion a year, $700 million a year in fares lost, and then goes, oh, we have a cash crunch. Oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to do congestion pricing to raise billions of dollars. At the end of the day, to the point you were making, we're already there in terms, I think there's obviously and understandably been a shift in the mindset with respect to victims of crime, whether it be prostitution or whether it be those dealing with substance use disorder. We're not trying to criminalize and penalize the victim. If somebody has a substance use issue, you're trying to get them help. But what my fundamental view is, if somebody is engaged in the trafficking or the selling or dealing of drugs, they need to be prosecuted. If you look at the fentanyl crisis, where 70,000 Americans are dying in a given year from fentanyl overdose, and most of this being trafficked across the southern border, the fentanyl lacing prescription drugs, lacing recreational drug. This is a major problem. And I've introduced legislation on numerous fronts. One, to deal with the cartels, and number one, call them what they are. They're terrorist organizations. They should be treated as such, and we should be working with Mexico to crack down hard. Two, anybody who traffics in fentanyl-laced products should be charged with attempted murder. And obviously, if the individual who takes that product dies, they should be charged with murder, period. Sorry, you shouldn't be doing it. 3, we've had a challenge here where if somebody's death is ruled by the ME, that yes, there's fentanyl, but there's other underlying drugs, they don't rule it as a fentanyl-related death. So it makes it a lot harder to prosecute on those terms. So I've introduced legislation to address that at a federal level. Because, again, when you're dealing with this, whether you're dealing with human trafficking, whether you're dealing with drug trafficking, the people that are engaged in the actual trafficking of the person or the product should be absolutely charged, prosecuted, and put behind bars, period. And until we get to that place where we're actually prosecuting crimes again, this crisis is going to continue to get worse. It really does boil down to that.
Appreciate all the comments. We are going to shift the discussion to another area, but Amanda, you have a quick comment,
I
please?
wanted to quickly discuss the victim support and survivor support side of law enforcement and engaging law enforcement. I think one thing is obviously having advocates like within police departments and things like that to respond to potential trafficking situations, and just overall language around trafficking. If someone is being forced into sex work, they're a sex trafficking survivor. There's no such thing as a child prostitute because a child cannot consent to commercial sex work. Really just reframing how we talk about these things, keeping the people that are being victimized at the forefront, bringing survivors to the table to talk about these things, to talk about their experiences with law enforcement. And just, also recognizing, obviously, I know this is kind of going into the third question, so I'll
We're going into it. It's perfect.
Yeah, so obviously there's a migrant crisis, but trafficking happens to U.S. citizens too. A lot of our clients, our sex and labor trafficking survivors, are U.S. citizens. And so I think it's really just to keep, important to keep survivors at the forefront of everything we're doing, and bring them to the table and ask them what they think about legislation and things like that, because they've been through this before. They've had these interactions with law enforcement, with prosecutors, and their input is absolutely vital if we want to make change.
Our job here is to have emotion, to use that emotion, to show that emotion, but then also to put it aside to a degree and say, how do we make a meaningful difference? How do we help? When it comes to higher penalties and prosecuting criminals, yes, that is certainly going to be part of our recommendations. I do want to shift the conversation to the migrant crisis and specifically to our providers, because obviously a big part of the migrant crisis is a federal issue. The state issue is when law enforcement can't talk to each other and a variety of other angles. But I really want to hear on the migrant crisis, on the individuals that are coming into this country, how that's impacting our providers and our school districts in terms of services, resources that you're now spending, whether it's TESOL, English as a second language, teachers to combat that. Talk to us about how the migrant crisis is impacting your students now, and how the individuals that are coming here to look for a better life are also being impacted in what ways?
So I mentioned earlier when we had the introductions that we are meeting children who have trauma experiences in their background, students who have come across the border into the United States and ultimately to our schools, who are coming to us with those types of higher level needs because of their experiences in trauma. It's very complicated. The experiences they've had because of their age, some of them earlier than kindergarten, it takes a lot of work to support them and to understand what it is that they've been through, because they don't have the ability to articulate the way an older child might, what it is that they've experienced. So that's something that we are seeing. Additionally, it is a regular occurrence now that in the last several years, each budget will include some additional expenditure for E&L teachers to add to our complement based on what the regulations say we need per child.
Yeah.
So as children, now that need does fluctuate, so as children progress and test out of E&L, then we can do things differently, but there is a rather challenging situation there to keep up with that need.
Can you quantify that to a degree in your particular district?
The addition of one teacher will be a six-figure addition to the budget, so we're at about $100,000 to add a single teacher when we need to. And because of the arrival of the data on the state testing performance, the late arrival, I should say, it's hard to know and hard to budget with great accuracy when that need is going to change. Because we're not getting the E&L results sometimes in time.
That's interesting.
To budget precisely. So we have to make some projections.
When it comes to an influx of students coming in, and you say $100,000 for an additional E&L teacher, and you talk about ratios, to properly adhere to the ratios, how many more teachers would you need to hire based on some of the students that are coming in?
It's going to depend on the capacity at each school.
Okay.
It's hard to know.
Okay.
We have 5 schools, and each of them will be at different levels with what we have. So some of our teachers might have space in their schedule, and others might be at a tipping point where one more child might create a need for an additional staff member.
Thank you.
Our yellow population has increased about 25% over the last 5 years. And as my colleague indicates, when you take a look at the results and you don't necessarily get them in a prompt manner in terms of being able to budget, you're making a lot of projections. And you've got to take money that you might put somewhere else, and you may have to put it into a code because of something that you might expect. And we all know things change rapidly. So from one year to the next, you might need that money in that budget code. But then the next year, you may not, but yet you budgeted in that code, you've taken it out of another area. Maybe you've cut a program, maybe you've cut a service. So that would be helpful, getting those results in a more timely fashion from New York State. We have added 12 people personnel services positions in the last 3 years. We also have a law enforcement presence in each of our 15 buildings. We're proud of that. The reason we do that is because our communities are concerned, our students are concerned, and if your students are concerned and they don't necessarily feel comfortable, they're not going to reach their highest educational attainment. So between that and the addition of populations moving in and non-traditionally served areas, it's creating a budget issue for us. It's forcing us to project in some areas where we really don't know from year to year, what the impact is going to be. I can tell you that in our school district, our population is actually growing at the elementary level. We have a number of students over the past 3 or 4 years that have come from the New York City area, the tri-state area, that have moved up into our district. Some of them also have language barriers. So not only are they coming to a new area and are they assimilating to a new area, but it's difficult, obviously, to have that communication that you need. And sometimes they may have issues that in elementary school, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of investigation, it takes a lot of therapy to get to the root of those issues. So again, I would say it has had a major impact on our budget. We see similarly, as my colleague indicates, students that have been through trauma. And that's why I mentioned before, the collaboration, I think, is critical, because if we can leverage those resources and again, all work together, I think that's going to be beneficial for all of us. But it has caused a change in our paradigm in the areas that we need to deliver our programs and services.
We're going to kind of mix up the group 3, group 4 in this one, where we're going to talk about education and training to better equip professionals and New Yorkers to recognize someone who needs help, just because I think it's going to be a pretty substantial conversation. Since we have the providers here, people who have training, people who work with individuals also every single day, how often do the school districts interact with these nonprofits? And I know you cover different areas, may not be the same individuals. We have seen throughout the state a stigma where some school districts say, oh, we don't have that problem. We don't want to talk about that. And
everybody has a problem.
Right, so would love to speak to the interactions you currently might have with some of our providers. And I know that there's some state mandates on school districts to provide certain levels of training. How does that work in your particular districts, and what challenges do you see there?
We do collaborate with the Center for Safety and Change. That's one agency that's familiar to us. I've not met anyone until today from my sister's place, so this is a great opportunity to do some networking. But that is one of the agencies that we have interaction with. The thing I'd like to point out is that human trafficking might call for a particular nuanced training for counselors that I think our people, our clinicians, would be very interested in, our social workers and psychologists. So there's something different about it, I think, that calls for a different skill set, that our clinicians have skills broadly, but maybe there's something particular about this that they would benefit from learning.
We've heard the same, and we've heard nonprofits talk about the interest in being in the schools. I'm assuming that's something that you are currently doing and are more interested in doing. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a youth educator who goes into schools a lot talking about healthy relationships, things like that. And sometimes our anti-trafficking program is kind of pulled into that to talk about human trafficking and obviously making it age appropriate. We're not going to throw out legal definitions to 6th graders. We're just going to kind of talk about how healthy relationships with family, with friends, with people you meet on the internet, things like that, internet safety. But I do think some school districts and parents are hesitant to want their children to learn about this topic or talk about it, because it is a very nuanced, very taboo subject, and I think it's an important thing to talk about. I think someone mentioned the internet and social media and how that has played a huge role, especially in the trafficking of children or the exploitation of children. Our partners over at Safe Harbor in Westchester County do a lot of youth presentations, and so I can definitely touch base with them to see how often they're in our schools and things, because like I said, we serve adult survivors, so they might be better equipped to kind of talk about that. But yeah, I think it's an important topic, and I think if you make it age appropriate, it can definitely be beneficial to any school age child.
Yeah, we would definitely be interested in hearing from your perspective what training you'd welcome, what training you currently have, and yes, Gillis?
I just wanted to say, in collaboration with My Sister's Place, Hope Store, and Safe Harbor, we had an event last year in collaboration with our Y Leaders program, which is the youth program for young girls between the ages of, I believe, 10 to 18. And they come to our facility once a week. And Charlotte Broadbeck, who was a senior at the time, created an event about what is sex trafficking, and all of the other programs were there. They had professionals speak on the subject, and we had a victim of sex trafficking present who spoke about her story and shared what is it like to see a victim, know what a victim is, and what does it mean to be sex trafficked. That was very successful.
Good.
The police department in White Plains actually thoroughly enjoyed the event and asked her to do another presentation for their department. I think education is huge and a big part of the solution to the problem. If we had more police departments that were educated on what it looks like, more parents, more staff of all of our organizations that know what to look for, it will help reduce the numbers of all of the people that are being victimized by this.
So that's a good point. We've heard a lot about that and the best way to fund it and the best individuals to deliver that message. So if you have folks that are doing it and it worked and we can figure out a way to copy and paste where it's working, who's delivering the message, what that message looks like, how old the kids are, send us that information. Send us their point of contact. We want to be able to see what's working and who's collaborating already to show that it has success and can be duplicated elsewhere. Please send us that. Yeah.
And may I just add, okay, so I introduced before that I'm a early childhood educator, Kids Net Child Care Program, and I believe, in my opinion, that early education is very important for our children. The early start is always the best start. And it also assists our children in identifying these problems as they grow. And in this community, Spring Valley in particular, we need after-school programs for our children. When they leave school, where are they heading? We don't know. And so we need those kind of settings to help to assist our children. I have worked closely with the Department of Social Services, CPS. We see homelessness in the community where some people might just think living in the street is called homelessness, but in the homes there's overcrowding, and it possesses the kind of situation where children and parents are being molested, or they are being abused, or they are being maltreated. And so we need to look at these kind of situations as well. Yes, we understand the border issue and all of that is affecting us right here in Spring Valley as well. And, you know, we find that most of our children now, they are not able to communicate effectively. We have to get interpreters to interpret for them. And sometimes they're being abused and they're unable to explain that they're being abused. And so we're looking forward to see if this forum would be able to assist this community with more school-age programs, with more awareness for our children and families. We see behavior issues, we see speech bilingual issues, and there's so many issues right here in Spring Valley. I heard about sex trafficking, prostitution. It's right here in Spring Valley. And I'm hoping that our representative, John McGowan, Mike Lawler, will be able to look at these situations, and we hope that they will return to office so what they have started will continue, because they're always in the community and they know the needs of this community. And I am here, and I'm happy to be here, invited by the Mike Lawler's office to express to this forum what this community is facing. And I hope that there will be a takeaway for all of you, and that will come together. The school district is crazy, it's dramable. We need help here with our children. So I'm happy that I'm here, and I'm able as a community leader to speak also for this community. Thank you.
Thank you. And you hit on a really important topic, and that's there are a lot of underlying issues and services and just straight up education for our students that will lead to less issues of dependency on substance use, which then puts an individual, a citizen, in a position to be victimized, to be trafficked. So it all is connected, and part of this roundtable and the ones we've had throughout the state is to educate ourselves on where we need to beef that up, what's working, and how do we help those other areas that are looking for help and partner with other organizations. So keep sending us the information after this, and you bring up some good points, so thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
So
Sorry, me again.
No, you're great.
Just talking about education and training. So I was on that panel that the YWCA had, and it was really great because it brought together the service providers as well as the survivor. And I think kind of just having discussions like that that are open to people who want to come. And then also, you know, we present to Westchester Police Academy twice a year to new recruits. On, you know, it's a whole day, so they get some things from law enforcement, like past law enforcement about, like, you know, law enforcement and trafficking, and then kind of what we can offer. There is a New York State regulation that requires law enforcement to, at the first sign of reasonable human trafficking presented in person, to put that referral into OTDA for a person to be confirmed as a trafficking survivor. Not many law enforcement officers know that, and I think that that's something that OTDA is working on. But I think law enforcement, I think medical professionals, what to look for. If someone comes in with a work-related injury, probe a little bit, talk to them. How did they get it? What were they doing on the job? Were they not provided proper safety equipment? You know, things like that, that might be pointing to a labor trafficking situation. You know, someone who, you know, reproductive, you know, coercion, things like that when it comes to sex trafficking survivors, STDs, STIs, like really just knowing what to look for. And I think, you know, Westchester County, you know, brings medical professionals to the table at our task force, which I think is really great. And I know that there's new legislation surrounding hotels, motels, train stations, you know, airports, things like that, which I think are really important. But really just talking to anyone who, I mean, let's be real, we all can come across a trafficking survivor in our day-to-day. You know, a lay person isn't necessarily going to be able to look at someone and be like, you're being trafficked. But if you're in a profession where you're coming in contact with human beings, there is a potential of you identifying a survivor. And so I think any and all professions need training on what trafficking looks like, and once identifying that person, what can you do for them next? Some survivors don't want help. They have trauma bonds with their traffickers, and they are not ready for help when it is offered to them. But we let them know that that door is always open. But just, you know, also like talking about safety. If you see someone and they're there with their trafficker, you probably shouldn't go up to that person and be like, hey, do you need help? Like, you know, that's when you need that training and education. So honestly, I think all professions need to know what human trafficking is, how to identify it, and then what to do from there.
Oh, you nailed it. What's been going through my head this whole time. Jane and I, we're with Orange County Probation, and we're the crime victim counselors. And one of the hats that we have is we work at the family court, and we're assisting with order protection. So there's people coming in, there's no question, when people come, there is not your citizenship or, you know, and none of that is a question. It's just they come in and they know that they can get the help. And I know just for myself, last week I had 2 different petitioners that came in, and that red flag, just listening, but I personally felt like, you know, for me, there was a lack of training to really identify, and, you know, so it was a little frustrating because it was like, okay, where do I send them? How do I deal with this? Right. And one was dealing with the family, and everything that they described, I was like, oh my goodness, you know. And then I had the other one, it was dealing with a teenager that was actually her father had kind of, and everything, it was just like, you know, like ding, 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 ding. So for me, it was just like, okay, I definitely need more training in this, because, you know, I felt like I would have been able to help a lot more if I had more training in it, and not only that, knew what resources, you know, where can I call, what can I do? Because sometimes when you do ask questions, it's like, well, I'm not really sure where to send you for this, you know, I'm not sure who can help you, so you kind of get that, you kind of get bounced around, and then at the end of the day, the victim is left, and they're the ones that, you know, are not getting the help that's needed, and, you know, so definitely.
Especially coming from your area. I mean, that's a powerful statement. Thank you.
Yeah, and you actually just touched on something that I was hoping to raise too, India, which is one of the things that I think is a problem is first of all, sometimes people who are being trafficked don't see themselves that way, or they don't identify themselves as being trafficked, and probably they may not be comfortable speaking with law enforcement, and I think it's a real opportunity for that collaboration that we keep talking about, where the crisis services or the services like at my sister's place, they could present through services to that individual a softer approach that can then be used to maybe, once that victim is able to or willing to do a disclosure, to then transition that individual over to law enforcement at that point, which I think is just so important. And knowing who to call and what to do is so important as well. I did have one quick question directed more to law enforcement, and we don't really have so much local law enforcement here at this session. We have at other places, but to the point that's been made earlier about how we don't, with prostitution, it tends to be, more through cell phones or through the internet. One person at our last session was talking about, not so many years ago, we had Craigslist, right? You had Craigslist and you had a corner where this activity was going on. Now, it's really anybody who's got a phone. Do you feel that law enforcement would benefit from understanding the sophistication that a lot of the trafficking rings currently have that seems to surpass what a lot of law enforcement has right now, to be able to really combat that or meet that? Because whether it's burner phones or any number of things that we've heard about, it seems as though the traffickers have an edge on the technology.
Well, we have the state police in general, every troop has a computer crimes unit that deals with that stuff. We just added 3 more investigators. It's more for predators, the predators for the children and stuff like that. Like we have the FBI task force in Albany, they sit on that. There also could be a task force, like they have the FBI task force, like predator task, but there also be a sex crime task force too. Like they just have the certain things to look for. And it's kind of like some of them are one and the same, you know what I mean? So they'll kind of run together with that. But we have our computer crimes, they're overworked, right? They have a lot of work now because everything's shifting towards technology, right? So it's getting more towards shoe leather, and more towards technology. And the state police has increased our computer crime unit to do that. And they'll keep branching out as long as it's, you know what I mean? So they'll keep branching out to these other things. But yeah, our guys are pretty savvy, our investigators. When they get a case, they know what to look for and to ask questions about, this seems odd. Maybe we can delve deeper into that, but technology is the thing. But now you got Signal app, you got these apps that are very, very hard to get into now, and that's where you use the majority of stuff, right? You say,
I had a case a couple years ago. It was with the CC unit, and it was an app I'd never heard of. Whisper was the name of the app, and it was actually one of the investigators in the unit. They had posed as a 12-year-old girl, and sure, there was somebody that said, I think, looking to run away from home, kind of thing, is what. It was a picture of a 12-year-old girl. It was one of our investigators, and they set up a meetup, and we were able to arrest him, and he's in prison now, for the conversation, images that he had sent to our investigator. So I will speak for the CCU. They're amazing. They are so overworked. The amount of search warrants that our county does, I don't want to speak for...
We do mountains.
I don't want to speak for Bob, but the amount of search warrants we do for this, and to get into phones, computers, any devices in the home to curtail the what's out there, what are on people's phones, the images that are on people's phones. I mean, you would be mind blown with some of the types of cases that we've seen. I was shocked. I had no idea that there's all these apps out there that I didn't even know existed. So, I can see both sides, but I do want to, agree with Captain that our unit is a way, they do everything that they need to do. They're very educated in that way.
I found the same thing. I don't think it's a lack of technological skills or education. We're being inundated.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's just so much crime you can catch, And like I said before, it really has exploded in the last 3.5, 4 years, where we were able to really keep an eye on the whole county and things that were out of county, we were able to send out of county. Right now, it's all over the place. And not to beat a dead horse, but it is human trafficking. And to piggyback on what Mike Lawler said, if we don't get a handle on what's going on at the border, it's not going to get better. It just isn't going to get better.
When we talk about the question that was raised by Assemblywoman Walsh, I think a specific part of her question was filtered down to the local town and city departments.
Right.
You guys know where you're at. You have the resources.
Well, we're a resource for them, so they
Right.
come
Yes.
to us.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
but my question is, how much more do those departments need to be trained? Because they're the ones that are there that are going to be identifying this to allow you to do those jobs, to get those searches.
Well, the bigger police departments have their creative crimes units.
They have them in.
They have them in. So
Okay.
like say Westchester County, for example, 43 police departments, it's a monster, right?
Right.
So they can come to us, to the Westchester County District Attorney's Office, go to the county police, right? So usually come to us, and we can only take so much on. To train an individual guy to do computer crimes in a smaller PD is asking for a lot of resources. That's why with the state police reform in 1917 from history lesson, right? To support smaller police agencies in stuff that they need, any kind of resource they need. And so we farm out. I mean, and the sad part of what this is, you could do this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 365 days a year, and you're gonna scratch the surface of the sick people, out there doing this stuff. It's disturbing to say the least. You know?
I don't mean to stop you, but let me ask you. I want to stay there. So when it comes to those consuming, we wouldn't have a problem if there wasn't a market for it.
Exactly.
And it's all of us. It's our neighbors.
Yep.
It's people
Yep.
want to talk about it. It's
Yep.
people we know in our lives.
100%.
Right. When it comes to penalties, you said you nab somebody, right? What did you get them on? What does that look like? And do those laws need to be strengthened?
Right, so for the crime so there was a couple of crimes that were charged, but which we had the best evidence for in order to go forward on a Superior Court information, to have him plead guilty before a county court judge. I believe it was 3 years, I believe he's going to prison for, with post-release supervision of 10 years.
So that's crazy, right? So increase penalties, maybe mandatory minimums, but also just give us an idea of what that law is. I'd love to get a follow-up on it,
Sure,
because
of
we
course.
want to recommend increased penalties, because it should not be a partisan issue, right? If it's so specific to the exploitation of children, especially when it comes to the digital part of it, I don't think the laws have been caught up, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, with the penalty.
No, I mean,
No.
a lot of the crimes that a lot of the cases that get charged out of the computer crimes unit with an agent attached to it, we're talking about nonviolent felonies. That's what we're talking about.
And to your point, if you want to create less of an issue, if we don't want to just scratch the surface by having the training and doing our job, hey, life without parole. I know that's extreme, right? But that's what I'm talking about. We need to increase the penalty to create less of an issue.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of this as well.
It's so absurd because we have any child porn cases and anything like that. We'll spend a year investigating someone, and as soon as we get the person or persons, we send it to the feds right away.
Right.
Because they're not going to get hit hard in New
At the
York
state.
at all.
That's what we're hearing.
We've
a lot
heard
of.
that, yeah, we've heard that.
And it's sad.
It is. We agree. Yes, we agree.
And
We
we don't
also-
want to, and I'll be honest with you, I don't want to call the feds. I don't want to call it. I don't know how the district
We
attorney.
do, because I know they're going to get
For
slammed.
now, they do, yeah, of course we're going to do now, but before, I didn't want to keep I was like, we could do this. The
Right.
state has enough stuff in there.
Oh, you can certainly do it, absolutely.
100%, as long as we get supported at the executive level and saying, hey, yeah, these crimes are serious and these are the charges. And let's be like, the decriminalization is the smaller crimes, all right, I don't think we're getting crazy on that stuff. But the bigger stuff, the stuff that, these really bad guys and are getting out of jail and with gun assault charges.
Repeat offenders, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
But these child porn cases, this is sex trafficking.
Yes.
It's all human trafficking.
Yeah.
We had a mother, I spoke at the last roundtable about this, and Mary Beth's heard this story. Mother, New Yorker, 14-year-old son, raised right, played sports, didn't know that there was an issue, had someone on one of these apps from another country befriend them, had them send a photo, and then blackmailed this 14-year-old kid and said, pay me X amount of dollars or I'm going to release this photo.
Happens every day.
Yeah.
Mother brought him to soccer practice, killed himself, never saw him again.
Yeah.
This happens in our
Does
state,
happen.
happens in our communities.
That's nice.
We need to figure it out. So We're gonna ask for your help to give us some of these specific cases so that we can then go to our colleagues and say, how are you gonna stand for this? We gotta fix it. So that's a big part of what we wanna do. When it comes to education, bring it back to the providers, if we can. Really, the collaboration aspect is something we're hearing generally, but we want more specifics. We wanna know what works in your communities, what you've seen that's really been helpful, and we wanna push those things. And we want to hear more about your needs in our last few minutes.
I would say something like bringing community-based organizations into the schools.
Great.
Professionals into the schools that deal with this on a daily and a regular basis, unfortunately. That helps us, because we're not necessarily set up to do that. So we need that assistance. The door in Wappingers is always open. If your surrounding areas, if you go that far north, please let me know.
At least the door pretty open,
Okay.
surrounding areas, yeah.
Seriously, because it's an issue, and we all have to realize that it's an issue, we all have to work together.
Can I just address that for one minute? Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
Because our domestic violence and anti-trafficking prevention team often find resistance in the public schools.
Yeah.
No, we'll deal with that, with our health classes are dealing with
We
it.
need you.
that
And they are
everywhere we've been.
resisting.
We need you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. To our team here from Child Protective Services, and that's near and dear to me because I used to be an assistant county attorney prosecuting abuse and neglect cases. One of the things that came up as far as the definition of human trafficking, one of the things, I represent an area around like Saratoga, more upstate. We see a lot of within the family trafficking, and in some of the rural areas, that's more like what it looks like. So one of the ideas was to make sure that the human trafficking definition encompasses, within the family trafficking. What are your thoughts on doing something like that?
Well, I mean.
Rather than just seeing it as an abuse or neglect.
Right, so for us to be involved, it has to be a person legally responsible. So we haven't really found too much of that. There are some cases here and there. Our sex abuse is someone that is either a family member, a direct family member.
Or PLR.
The other one really is usually an LER, law enforcement referral will get sent out. We haven't found too much of that at this point. It's always screened, it's always looked at. Like I said, we can get a case 1 or 2 times and we know something's happening, no disclosure, there's delayed disclosure, there's reasons why we don't get that. So
I think that whole PLR, the person legally responsible definition, I remember having to deal with that, and it was so tied up with case law. There's so much case law surrounding it. I just think that whole area of the law could really get cleaned up. So
I
that,
agree with completely,
right?
yes.
I mean, that's, because if that argument doesn't hold water, then what do you have, against that, mom's boyfriend, and you have to look at how often, he's around, and what is he, it's a mess.
that area could definitely get strengthened. That's
Yeah.
when we run into a lot of problems. Because if they are not identified as a person legally responsible, we don't have any weight. We cannot take it into court.
Yeah.
So we also know there's a lot of barriers when it comes to law enforcement. If there's no disclosure, or there is a disclosure and the child does not want to prosecute, then the offender, they go free.
Right.
So that area too is very problematic for us.
Yeah.
What was that called?
Person legally responsible, PLR. Yeah. Thank you.
Any final thoughts on, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead, India.
I was just thinking, when you were speaking before with the pictures and online things, one thing I've noticed when assisting with the order of protection, I will get people that come in, honestly, more than quite often, where the children, there's pictures they've taken, the boyfriend takes it and sends it to all their friends, and one of the things that for me was, I find a little frustrating, is a lot of times when I'm asking them, have you gone to the police? Have you filed a report? And it's interesting how many cases I get where people have gone to the police stations first and they send them to us. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, my hands are tied to a certain extent, well, I say mine, but family court, because family court, it's family. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times these are, kids in the school, different, they're kind of like a little bit outside the reach of family court, but yet it's, you know, we kind of get, it's like everybody gets sent. They get sent, and it's, you know, you're sitting there, sending them up to the judge and just hoping that the judge is gonna give them, you know, and grant this, you know, stay away. But, it just, the complaint I get is that they've gone to, you know, they've been trying to, you know, get help. They're scared, they're embarrassed, because now you have young kids and their picture is throughout the school, and, you know, and the frustration I'm hearing is they're not feeling like, you know, the parents are like, nothing's happening.
So
you
it
know?
speaks to the training of local police departments too, right? Because if a local police department is coming to you and what you're saying is you need something kind of on file with the local police department, then that's a communication that needs to take place within our town and village departments.
Yeah.
I was listening.
Okay. All right, we're gonna have our member closing remarks unless there's somebody else who has anything else they wanted to chime in on and talk about. Yes, ma'am.
Just one thing in response to that, there is, and you may be aware of this, through NCMEC, there's a program called Take It Down. So if a child has a photo that has been posted online or distributed of them, take it down. From what I've heard, I've never had to utilize it for a client. It's a very lengthy process, but it does work to get that photo of the child taken off of the internet. And yeah, I mean, law enforcement should, the issue we run into with law enforcement is if it's just a singular individual, survivor, victim, law enforcement doesn't want to open up an investigation because they're not getting this huge trafficking ring. And so, you know, if it's one person, then sometimes it does go unnoticed.
Interesting, thank you. Assignments later.
Listen, like I said earlier, helping us lean into this type of discussion, we really do appreciate. And so all the work that you're doing in our individual communities, but across the Hudson Valley region, we really appreciate and thank you for. This has been an ongoing effort led by their co-chairs here, and I'm going to turn it back over to them. But just know that we're here as a resource. This isn't the end of the conversation, it's just part of a larger discussion. And we're looking forward to utilizing your expertise to develop better processes, but also better legislation to help the victims of human trafficking and to make sure that we're helping the people in need. So thank you again so much for being here and spending your morning with us.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Walsh?
Well, thank you, co-chair. I just wanted to say thank you as well. For those of you who didn't know, we are all in the Assembly Minority Conference, and one of the things that I deeply respect about this conference is that in the off session, when we're not in passing an obscene number of, laws and arguing about them until December, when from June until December, we hold task forces like this throughout the state. And I've been honored over the years that I've been serving to be on the Learning for Work Task Force. We had a school safety and security task force a couple of years ago. So this is the latest. I want to reassure you that the time that you've spent has been really helpful. I was referring back a lot to, I'm a big note taker, was referring back to a lot of my notes from the other ones that I've been at around the state. There are a lot of similar comments, but every time we all get together, we get something a little bit different and as well. Very helpful information today. I just want to reiterate what Brian said earlier about after today. If you can please send us anything else you think would be helpful. Some of you really didn't say very much, which is totally fine. You're here more to listen. But if there was something that you really wanted to get out there that maybe just didn't fall neatly into one of the topics that we were covering, we still would really like to hear it. So please, not to put any additional work on top of already overworked individuals, but it would really help us out. So thank you very much. And hopefully when we do come out with this report, we're going to share it widely so that you can actually see what it turned into. So thank you again.
Thank you. And that's just what I want to say is thank you all very much for your time. You all have such important jobs to do, and you took time away to be here today. And our mission and our goal, and I say this everywhere we go, is not to waste that time, to utilize it to make this situation better. And just by talking and having this conversation, I know that we're raising awareness on an issue that doesn't get enough attention. So
we want to thank you for your time. We want to thank you for your contributions, and we would absolutely invite you to keep sending us information as we begin to put this report together. So thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
I'm sure you've been asked 100 times before. You're not related to Bonnie, are you?
No.
Understood. I think we only have one left of the city business.
You too, take care.
We're probably just going to go to next week, and that's it. So
Okay,
we're going to make that determination. Probably at some point there.
Yeah, if I didn't have the representative, I would come down to.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
But-
It's important for me to do that at my home with the school providers. There's a variety of reasons why I'm ending it there.
Yeah, this is very interesting to hear.
It was difficult.
It was very